Coming home was supposed to be a joyous reunion, a perfect day after a year overseas. But the moment a small-town cop pulled me over, I knew the past I'd spent a decade burying was about to be unleashed. The scent of freshly cut grass and my sister Sarah's ridiculously expensive lavender bushes filled the air. It was supposed to be a good day, a perfect day even. I'd been overseas on a work trip for the better part of a year, and the sight of my nephew, 7-year-old Leo, waving frantically from the front porch was like a balm on my soul. He was holding a crudely drawn picture of what looked like me fighting a dragon, and his smile was missing the same front tooth it had been when I'd left. I eased my foot off the brake of the rented sedan, a nondescript but comfortable car, and was about to turn into the driveway when the world behind me exploded in blue and red light. My body went rigid. It's a Pavlovian response, one drilled into you from a young age, but my training layered something else on top of it, a cold, methodical calm. I glanced in the rearview mirror. A local police cruiser, a single officer inside. I ran the mental checklist. Speed? I was crawling at 5 miles an hour. Tail light? I'd checked the car over myself at the rental agency. It was pristine. So this wasn't about the car. I knew it before the officer even got out. I put the car in park, killed the engine, and rolled down the window, placing my hands visibly on the steering wheel at 10 and 2. The officer who approached was the caricature of a small-town cop with a big ego. He was built like a refrigerator, with a thick neck that bulged over his collar and a pair of mirrored sunglasses that hid any trace of humanity. His name tag read Miller. "License and registration," he grunted, his hand resting on the butt of his holstered sidearm. His voice was gravelly, laced with an impatience that felt manufactured, like he'd been waiting all day for an excuse to use it. "Of course, officer," I said, my tone even and respectful. I'd learned long ago that the best way to de-escalate these situations was to be a ghost. No sudden movements, no attitude, no anything that could be misinterpreted as a challenge. I slowly reached for the glove compartment. "Hold it," he snapped. "What are you doing in this neighborhood?" I paused, my hand hovering. "I'm visiting my sister, sir. She lives right there." I nodded my head towards the house where Sarah was now standing on the porch, her arms wrapped around a confused-looking Leo. Her smile was gone, replaced by a tight line of worry. Miller's eyes flicked to my sister, then back to me. A slow, contemptuous sneer spread across his lips. "Right, your sister." He looked at my clothes, a simple but well-fitting polo shirt and chinos. He looked at the car. He looked at my skin. The calculation in his head was as loud as a siren. To him, the equation didn't add up. "This your car?" he asked, ignoring my statement. "It's a rental, officer. All the paperwork is in the glove compartment, along with my license." He leaned in closer, his stale coffee breath washing over me. "I'm gonna need you to step out of the vehicle." This was the part where the script always changed, the part where the cold calm I prided myself on was tested. "Is there a problem, officer?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "The problem is I told you to step out of the car. Are you deaf?" I complied, slowly. I opened the door and stood up, making sure to keep my hands where he could see them. I was a good 6 inches taller than him, and I could see the way his jaw tightened as I straightened to my full height. He saw it as a threat. I saw it as a tactical disadvantage if things went south. Taller targets are easier to hit. "Turn around, hands on the roof." I did as he said, pressing my palms against the sun-warmed metal of the car. From the corner of my eye, I could see Leo starting to cry. Sarah was trying to pull him back inside, but he was rooted to the spot, his little face a mask of terror. My heart clenched. This wasn't supposed to happen here. This was their safe place. I was supposed to be the one who kept the monsters away, not the one who brought them to the doorstep. Miller's pat-down was unnecessarily rough, a display of dominance for an audience of two. When he found nothing but my wallet and keys, his frustration grew. He couldn't find a reason, so he was going to have to invent one. "I'm smelling marijuana," he declared loudly. I almost laughed. It was the oldest, laziest trick in the book. The only thing I smelled was lavender and his cheap aftershave. Officer, with all due respect, I don't smoke, and I can assure you there's nothing in this car. You calling me a liar? He barked, shoving me against the vehicle. I think we need a more thorough search. He walked back to his cruiser and opened the rear door. My body went cold. It wasn't a standard cruiser, it was a K9 unit. Two of them. Belgian Malinois, sleek and muscular, their bodies coiled springs of barely contained aggression. They sat alert in the back, their eyes locked on me, waiting for a single word. Officer, this is completely unnecessary, I said, my training screaming at me to analyze every angle, every exit, every variable. Variable 1, agitated and irrational. Variable 2 and 3, 75 pounds of trained muscle and teeth each. Variable 4, and the only one that mattered, my terrified family watching from 30 yards away. It's necessary because I say it is, Miller sneered, pulling on a thick leather glove. He unclipped the leash of the first dog. It let out a low, guttural growl, a sound that vibrated in my bones. We're gonna find out what you've got, one way or another. My mind was racing. I could disarm him in 3 seconds. I could disable the first dog before the second one was out of the car. But I couldn't do it without traumatizing Leo for life, and I couldn't do it without blowing a decade of carefully constructed cover. My identity, my real work, was a ghost. Ghosts don't get into brawls with suburban cops. Last chance, Miller spat, the dog straining against the leash, its bare teeth dripping saliva. Tell me what you've got in the car, or I let him search you personally. I stood my ground, my eyes locked on his. I said nothing. I showed him nothing. And that, I knew, was the one thing he couldn't stand. He needed me to be scared. He needed me to beg. My silence was my defiance, and it was driving him insane. He took a step back, a cruel smile finally breaking through his facade. He had me, pinned, compliant, and at his mercy. He thought he'd won. He raised his arm, the leash held high. I could see my sister screaming now, a silent movie playing out in the background of my hyper-focused reality. Take him, Miller commanded, and the word hung in the air for a fraction of a second before he unleashed hell. The dog lunged, a blur of fur and fury, its jaws wide. Time seemed to warp, stretching and slowing. I saw the individual teeth, the flex of the animal's muscles, the insane glint in its eyes. My training took over, not the training that taught me to fight, but the deeper, more obscure training, the part of my life that no one, not even Sarah, knew about. As the animal's hot breath hit my face, I didn't flinch. I didn't brace for the bite. I met its gaze, and a single sharp word escaped my lips. A word that wasn't English, a word it should not have understood. Vestan. The word was Czech. It meant stand up, but in the specific dialect and tone I used, it was the formal command to cease an attack and assume a passive, upright position. A command used in a very specific training program east of the Elbe River, a program I knew intimately. For a terrifying, elongated half-second, the dog continued its lunge, its momentum unstoppable. And then it was as if it had hit a glass wall. The Malinois skidded to a halt on the asphalt, its claws scratching for purchase just inches from my leg. Its ferocious snarl died in its throat, replaced by a confused whimper. It shook its massive head once, then its eyes, no longer filled with blind aggression, locked onto mine. It tilted its head, a flicker of recognition, of deep-seated conditioning, overriding its handler's command. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, it sat. Its tail gave a single tentative thump against the ground. Silence. The kind of profound, absolute silence that rushes in to fill the space where violence was supposed to be. The birds stopped chirping. The distant hum of a lawnmower died. Even my sister, who I could see had her hand clapped over her mouth, was perfectly still. The only sound was Officer Miller's ragged breathing. "What did you just do?" he stammered, his bravado evaporating like mist in the sun. The hand holding the now slack leash trembled. I kept my hands on the roof of the car, my posture relaxed but ready. I turned my head just enough to look at him. "Your dog seems well trained, officer. Just maybe not by you." The insult, delivered in my calm, even voice, was like a lit match on gasoline. The blood rushed back to his face, his complexion turning a blotchy, furious red. Humiliation was a far more potent fuel for his rage than simple racism. He had been shown up. His weapon had defected. "Get him! Sick him!" he shrieked, yanking on the leash. The dog whined and looked from me to him, its loyalty now a tangled mess of conflicting commands. It stayed put. "Lej," I said softly, "lie down." The dog immediately obeyed, dropping to the asphalt with a weary sigh and resting its head on its paws, its gaze never leaving my face. It was waiting for its next instruction, from me. Miller stared, his mouth agape. His mirrored sunglasses couldn't hide the frantic confusion in his eyes. This wasn't in his playbook. This scenario didn't exist. He dropped the leash of the first dog as if it were a hot coal and stormed back to his cruiser. "You think you're smart, huh? You think you're some kind of dog whisperer?" he yelled, his voice cracking. "I got another one for you. Let's see you whisper to this one." He flung open the other rear door. The second Malinois, even larger and darker than the first, shot out like a cannonball. It didn't wait for a command. It sensed its handler's rage, the adrenaline pouring off him, and it reacted, a loyal instrument of his fury. It bounded toward me, its bark a deep, concussive roar that echoed through the quiet suburban street. I braced myself. My knowledge of the training program was extensive, but these were animals, not machines. A different handler, a different environment, variables could change everything. As the second dog closed the distance, my eyes scanned it, absorbing every detail. The powerful muscles of its haunches, the white foam flecking its lips, the collar, and the small, faded tattoo just visible on the inside of its left ear. It was a small triangle with a Cyrillic letter inside, a marker from the kennel. The very same kennel I had liberated 3 years ago from a Chechen warlord who used the animals to guard his prison. I had overseen the rehabilitation and relocation of every single dog from that operation myself. They were scattered across the globe, placed with trusted handlers in special forces units. They were not supposed to be here. Not in some sleepy North Carolina town, on the leash of a petty tyrant like Miller. The dog was almost on me, a black streak of impending pain. I could see the tag on its collar now, glinting in the sun. It was a simple circular piece of metal engraved with a single name. My heart hammered against my ribs. It wasn't possible, it couldn't be. But the tattoo and the name confirmed it. The world narrowed to the space between me and this animal, an impossible ghost from a past I had buried half a world away. Miller screamed, "Get him! Sick him!" he shrieked. The dog launched itself into the air, aiming for my chest. Ignoring the officer completely, I looked directly into the animal's eyes, and in a voice filled with a history she couldn't possibly have forgotten, I spoke her name, not as a command, but as a question. "Katya? Malenkaya moya, what did they do to you?"
The effect was instantaneous and breathtaking. Mid-air, the dog I knew as Katya twisted its body with an agility that defied physics. It landed not on me, but beside me, its paws scrabbling on the pavement. Her ferocious bark choked into a series of frantic, high-pitched yelps. She started to circle me, her body low to the ground, her tail tucked not in fear, but in submission. She whined, a long, mournful sound, pushing her wet nose insistently against my hand, which was still flat against the roof of the car. It was the same way she used to greet me every morning at the safe house in Poland, nudging me awake before the sun came up. Officer Miller looked like he was having an aneurysm. His face, already red, deepened to a shade of purple I hadn't thought humanly possible. His entire arsenal, his primary tools of intimidation, had not only been neutralized but had actively switched allegiance. He was a king without a kingdom, a bully without a punch, standing impotent on a quiet street in front of my sister's lavender bushes. "What is this? What kind of freak are you?" he sputtered, fumbling to regain control. I slowly, deliberately lowered my hands from the roof of the car. I turned to face him fully, a calm that felt like a block of ice settling in my chest. Katja moved with me, pressing against my leg, a living shield, occasionally glancing back at Miller with a low growl rumbling in her chest. The first dog, seeing her lead, got to its feet and trotted over, sitting attentively by my other side. I was now flanked by his own 2 attack dogs, and they were looking at him like he was the threat. The dynamic of the entire situation had irrevocably shifted. The power he thought he held was an illusion, and it had just shattered into a million pieces. "These dogs," I said, my voice dangerously soft, "are not your property." "The hell they aren't! They're assets of the sheriff's department," he blustered, his hand drifting instinctively towards his sidearm. "No," I corrected him. I knelt and ran a hand over Katja's head, scratching behind the ear with the faded tattoo. Her whole body shivered with pleasure. "This is Katerina. Her brother over there is named Boris. They were bred and trained at the Vinepol Special Projects Kennel outside of Grozny. They were stolen by a terrorist cell, rescued during a joint JSOC-CIA operation codenamed Winter Sun. So I'll ask you again, Officer Miller, how did they end up here with you?" Every detail I recited was a hammer blow to his composure. The classified operation name, the kennel's location, the dog's real names. This wasn't something you could just look up on Google. The color drained from Miller's face, the purple rage replaced by a pasty, sickly white. The mirrored sunglasses suddenly didn't seem to offer enough protection. He started to see that he hadn't pulled over some random guy in a rental car. He had pulled a pen from a grenade he didn't even know existed. I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered, his hand now frozen halfway to his gun. "They were assigned to me through the department's K-9 acquisition program." "And who runs that program, officer?" I pressed, standing up again. "Who signed off on the paperwork? Because somewhere there's a paper trail leading from a secure military facility to your patrol car. And I have a feeling some very serious people are going to be very interested in how that happened. People who don't wear badges and don't like it when their assets go missing." My sister Sarah, seeing the tide turn so completely, had finally found her voice. "What is going on?" she called out, walking slowly down the driveway, her phone held up and clearly recording. Leo was peeking out from behind her, his tear-streaked face a mixture of fear and awe. "It's okay, Sarah," I called back, never taking my eyes off Miller. "This officer and I were just having a misunderstanding about his dogs." Miller's mind was clearly racing, trying to find an escape route. He'd gone from being the hunter to the hunted in less than 5 minutes. He could try to arrest me, but he'd have to go through 2 dogs that were now actively hostile towards him. He could draw his weapon, but my sister was recording, and shooting an unarmed man flanked by his own K-9s would be a career-ending, if not life-ending move. He was trapped. His eyes darted around, looking for a witness, an ally, anyone. But the street was empty. It was just him, me, my family, and the 2 dogs who had chosen their side. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken threats. Finally, he seemed to make a decision, a desperate, stupid one. He lowered his hand from his gun and reached for the radio on his shoulder. "Dispatch, I have a 1053, man with a weapon," he started to say, his voice strained. "Bad idea, Miller," I interrupted, my voice dropping to an Arctic chill. "Requesting immediate backup. Suspect is armed and—" He trailed off. He wasn't looking at me anymore. He was looking past me, down the street. His jaw went slack. The radio slipped from his grasp, clattering onto the asphalt. I followed his gaze. A black, unmarked SUV with tinted windows had silently pulled up and parked about 50 feet away, blocking the road. It hadn't been there a second ago. There was no siren, no lights, just the quiet, menacing hum of a powerful engine. A passenger door opened, and a woman in a sharply tailored gray suit stepped out. She was holding a tablet, and even from this distance I recognized her. Director Evans, my boss. The one person on Earth I never, ever wanted to see outside of a secure facility.
She didn't look at me. She didn't look at my sister. Her cold, piercing eyes were locked directly on Officer Miller. She lifted the tablet, its screen glowing in the afternoon sun. "Officer Miller." Her voice cut through the air, amplified by some unseen speaker. It was calm, professional, and utterly terrifying. "We have your complete service record, your financials, and a live feed from your body camera, which you seem to have turned off 3 minutes ago. We also have a signed confession from a Sergeant Davis at Fort Benning detailing how he sold you 2 unregistered military assets for $5,000 in cash. You have exactly one choice. Get in your car, hand over the leashes, and drive away. If you do, you will resign from the force this evening for personal reasons, and we will not pursue federal charges. If you do not—" She paused, letting the threat hang in the air. "Well, the dogs seem to have already made their decision, and so have we." Officer Miller stood frozen, a statue of pure, unadulterated terror. The authority he had wielded with such casual cruelty moments before had been systematically dismantled and turned against him. He was no longer a cop flexing on a civilian. He was a cornered criminal facing a power so far beyond his comprehension that it might as well have been alien. His world of traffic stops and misdemeanors had just collided with the shadow world of national security, and he was about to be flattened. He looked from Director Evans to me, then down at the 2 dogs, who were now watching him with undisguised animosity. Katya let out another low growl, a clear warning. The choice Evans had given him wasn't really a choice at all. It was an order, delivered with the crushing weight of an organization that did not make suggestions. With trembling hands, Miller unclicked the leashes from his belt and let them fall to the ground. He didn't dare try to hand them to me. He stumbled backward, his eyes wide, never turning his back on me or the dogs. He practically fell into his cruiser, fumbled with the keys, and started the engine with a roar. He didn't even bother with a 3-point turn, just cranked the wheel and sped away in reverse, tires squealing in protest before he managed to straighten out and disappear down the street, leaving a cloud of exhaust and shattered ego in his wake. The moment his car was gone, the tension on the street snapped. Sarah rushed forward, throwing her arms around me. "Michael, what in God's name was that? Who was that woman? How did you— the dogs?" Leo ran to my side, but he didn't hug me. Instead, he knelt and cautiously held out a hand to Katya. She sniffed it once, then licked his face, sending him into a fit of giggles. The fear was gone, replaced by the simple, uncomplicated joy of a boy meeting a dog. Boris, the more stoic of the 2, nudged my other hand with his head, demanding a scratch. The scene was so absurdly domestic, so completely at odds with the high-stakes drama that had just unfolded. Director Evans walked towards us, her heels clicking softly on the pavement. The black SUV glided forward, stopping beside her. She gave me a look that was equal parts exasperation and something that might have been respect. "Agent Thorne," she said, her voice back to its normal, unamplified volume. "You have been stateside for less than 6 hours. I believe that's a new record." "He was a problem that needed solving, Director," I replied, standing up straight. "And these are assets that needed recovering." "So I see," she said, her eyes softening almost imperceptibly as she looked at Leo laughing with Katya. "Sergeant Davis is already in custody. It seems Officer Miller wasn't the only one he was selling to. You've just untangled a very nasty little side hustle for us."
She handed me a slim, unmarked burner phone. "We'll need your official statement, and we'll need to arrange for transportation for our assets." "They're not assets," I said firmly, looking down at Katya. "They're soldiers. They deserve a proper retirement." Evans raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "And what do you propose? A condo in Florida?" "They are highly trained, highly dangerous animals, Thorne." "I know," I said. My mind was already working, formulating a plan. "My sister has a lot of land, a big fenced-in yard, a kid who could use a couple of very loyal protectors. They were stolen from a good life once. They deserve a chance to have it back."
Sarah looked from me to the dogs and back again, her eyes wide. "Michael, are you serious? We can't just adopt 2 military attack dogs." "They're not just attack dogs, Sarah," I said, my voice earnest. "They're heroes, and they trust us. Look." As if on cue, Katya flopped onto her back at Leo's feet, exposing her belly and wriggling in the grass. Leo, fearless, collapsed on top of her in a heap of giggles and puppy licks. Boris sat beside them, a stoic and watchful guardian. Director Evans watched the scene for a long moment. A rare, genuine smile touched her lips. "The paperwork will be a nightmare," she said, sighing. "But, considering the circumstances and the fact that you just prevented a major interagency incident by speaking Czech to a dog, I suppose we can make an exception." She nodded to the 2 men who had emerged from the SUV. "Secure the officer's vehicle. Wipe the dash cam and any local traffic cams that might have caught my arrival. Thorne, your rental car has been compromised. We'll have a new one delivered within the hour." She turned to leave, then paused. "And Thorne," she said, her voice low so only I could hear, "next time you come home, try to keep a lower profile. I can't be everywhere at once." She got back into the SUV, and just as silently as it arrived, it drove away. The street was quiet again. My sister just stared at me, a million questions in her eyes, but she didn't ask them. She knew she wouldn't get answers, not the real ones anyway. Instead, she just shook her head and smiled. "Well," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "I guess we have dogs now." I picked up the leashes from the ground, the worn leather familiar in my hand. I looked at my nephew, safe and happy. I looked at these 2 loyal animals, returned from the brink by a twist of fate and a shared secret language. My work took me to the darkest corners of the world, fighting monsters most people never knew existed. But right here in the sun-drenched driveway of my sister's home, I had just won the most important fight of my life. I had brought the monsters to her door, but I had also brought the guardians. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt like I was truly home.